quote, new computer, who dis?
Yeah. Okay. They should be able to see and hear me now. What should I be writing? What are you talking about?
Are we back up?
Can everyone hear us all in the chat?
I think everybody's spoken now. Can they hear us?
They're all like, shh, they came back on.
Yes, I can. I have
You
it
can hear
up
all
on
three of
mine,
us,
and I
okay.
can hear all three of us.
All right.
So I think we're good.
All right. Then we're going to call it good and get this thing started. We only started chatting 20 minutes ago. Let me grab my script. My legal pad with...
Boy, I hope, are we all doing some Frostmaiden talk tonight?
I am.
I'm doing some Frostmaidening.
I mean, I am in as much as I'm talking to you all about your
got-
games, but...
I've got issues. Hard issues.
Let's get started.
I expect heated Sam Mike banter tonight.
Sweet. So,
Heated?
I can
My
sit
tea
back
is
Oh,
and just
heated.
watch?
I don't know. We'll find out.
I mean, it's literally a question of I don't know if I am capable of just sitting back and watching. I'm got too big of a mouth.
Would be very good.
Yeah, you don't
podcast if you
start
did.
a podcast and run it for
Yeah.
a decade and a half because you like sitting quietly. Let me hit record on the audio.
Yep.
So that should be working. All right. We are recording on all ends. Oh, I don't know. How do I start this show? Welcome to Behind the DM.
You say this is three DMs,
Yeah, I
and
got
we're
that
talking
part.
about our games.
All right, welcome to Behind the DM screen. It is February of 2021. We are three DMs talking about our games and helping each other out. I am Jeff Greiner. With me, as always, as usually, is Mike Shea and Sam
Yo.
Dillon. All right,
Hello.
that's all the introduction you get. Mike, you have 15 minutes on the clock.
Yo.
Tell us about your game.
All right. I have started my Rime of the Frostmaiden
Did we get the
campaign.
conclusion of Eberron?
No, and you're not going to.
Oh.
I only have 15 minutes. So you want to see that? You go to my other show.
So we don't
on
get the
Sunday,
resolution.
Go to the Sly Flourish Twitch channel or my YouTube channel, and you can see 45 hours.
I don't
of me
have
talking
time for
about
video,
Eberron, including
Is there audio of this?
Well, it's also on the
There you
Sly
go.
Flourish
Thank you.
podcast. So if you go to the DM Deep Dive podcast, you will hear a wonderful, probably an hour and a half show that I'm going to shoot on Sunday where I talk about the finale of my game. But we're talking about Frostmaiden.
Fine.
Frostmaiden. My Eberron game, I ended it. It was great. People loved it. Frostmaiden. So we're 3 sessions in. We had a session 0, a session 1, and a session 2. And it's some work. This one's a tough one. Sam and I have been talking about this. So the Sly Flourish Discord channel, which you should also check out, we have a special Frostmaiden channel there that's just for spoilering Frostmaiden stuff, right? And I wanted it as a place where we could all come and talk about Frostmaiden. We're all running it. And so Sam and I have talked about lots of stuff. Sam hangs out in there, and lots of people hang out in there. We talk about what's going on with Frostmaiden. And so I ran to session 0, and I've got some tricky bits. One is that I had a player leave a long time ago, and we never replaced him, and we just sat with five main players. But we had another player who was also stepping out. I was down to 4. And so we brought in 2 new players. So I've got 6. I try to usually keep 6 because somebody's usually out. And if somebody's out, then I've got plenty of players to keep going. But because I brought 2 new players in who are both great guys, but they're new to the game, so they are ready to play full time. So I've got 6 players every week, and which is a little harder to do online. I'm not used to. My Sunday group is also 6 players, and I've managed that. So I didn't think it would be a big deal. But 2 brand new players to my style, 2 brand new players to the group. Brand new campaign, brand new characters. And the session 0 went fine. We had, we built our characters together. We picked I chose a group patron, which was Danica. She's like a sage. That's the one that gives you the quest to find the Chwingas. And I built her up. So she's more sort of like a sage druid type who's trying to figure out what crazy stuff is going on with nature.
Are you using the group patron rules from Tasha's?
So I'm using the group patrons kind of.
So what kind of patron
I
is
haven't
she?
really used them. Probably the sage, or there's like I don't have my Tasha's handy, but I think there's like a religious order one that can give you some access to stuff, mostly access to like spells and other sort of prairie sort of things. But I don't know how much that's going to come into play. I think that they're going to, the characters are going to end up being more self-sufficient than a patron's going to be for them here. So, but they picked their group patron. They built the characters together. We have a really cool cast of characters. We have 2 Furbolgs, a Goliath, a Snurfneblin gnome, a Drow, and a Aasimar. So a pretty wide range of crazy races, right? And they, so we started off, and I knew up front that running the Cephalic cold open, there's no way I was going to run it as is. Again, we can have all kinds of conversations about what you should do and what you shouldn't do and all that. And I said, I like the murder. I like the idea of the murder mystery, but I want it to actually have like a more of a mystery feel to it. So by the way, this is totally full of spoilers for Rime of the Frostmaiden, if you couldn't tell. And so I had them, like, they start off walking down the street, heading to the Northlook Inn in Bryn Shander. I started in Bryn Shander. We can have a conversation about that too. And they were going down, and they looked, and they saw 2 creatures eating a body. Like, there's a body of somebody lying on the ground. There's 2 creatures hunched over that are chewing on it. And so they, they're not going to just keep walking. They go over, and they turn around. There's 2 ghouls. And so the ghouls charge at them. They fight the ghouls. They're level 1. But there's 6 of them. So they didn't really have too hard a time fighting and beating the ghouls. A couple of them got hit. It was a little dangerous because they hit for like 7 damage. And then they killed the ghouls, and they saw that the ghouls had this like strange sigil marked on their foreheads, and like weird glowing blue eyes, which is sort of a theme that I'm throwing throughout a lot of this. A lot of weird glowing blue eyes in this adventure. And they go over to the body, and they see, yeah, sure, they were chewing on this body and eating it, but the body wasn't killed by the ghouls. The body was killed by a slashed throat and a pierced heart. And when they looked at the pierced heart, it was like a piece of ice. And they pulled it out, and it looked like a blade of a knife made out of ice that broke in the wound. And because it was so cold, it stayed as ice, but eventually it started to melt like when they're handling it. And so they're like, okay, well, we don't think the ghouls did this. Like, who did this? So then they said, well, let's go and talk to Danica. We'll go meet with our patron. They met with their patron. And she said, yeah, that's crazy. And there was a lot of people talking about this murder that went on there. So they sort of noted the fact that there are murders going on in Bryn Shander that are really weird. What they discovered a little bit is that the murdered victim was somebody who bought his way out of the lottery for the sacrifices. And so now there's like, who knew that they bought their way out? That's going to tell us something. And that came up sort of sessions later. So they meet Danica, and Danica says, that's great. One of the things that we want to do here, I was very, very kind of hard about, like, the goal of the characters is to help the people of the 10 towns survive the Endless Night. Their goal is not to find out why the Endless Night is occurring or how to get rid of it. Their goal is to help the people of 10 towns survive it. And when you have that as the motivation for the campaign, all of the other quests make sense, right? So if the motivation for the campaign is stop the Endless Night, every quest is a sidetrack that doesn't have anything to do with that.
But even the one later on to actually go to Oral and stop the Endless Night makes it.
Yeah, right. Well, then it can open up, right? Now you can sort of add that, but it's not this is sort of your Tomb of Annihilation problem. Don't start off Tomb of Annihilation by saying, hey, first level characters, we want you to save all of the people in the world from a crazy curse in this deep forest. We'll teleport you. Our 20th level mage will teleport you to the starting city to take care of that for you.
Especially save all of the people of the world who are powerful enough to have been raised from the dead. Yeah.
Yeah, to deal with this. Right. To go deal with this stuff.
Right.
So instead, you look at what the adventure has, and you build the theme around that. And the theme is surviving in isolation in Icewind Dale. So that's the theme that I'm kind of reinforcing. Right. And then figuring out, and they might. So one of the things is one of the characters is a Twilight cleric, and she doesn't want the night to come back. She likes the fact that it's night there all the time. She's a Drow Twilight cleric. And her thought is like, how do I make sure all the people of 10 towns can still survive here and embrace the fact that they're in night? Because we have entire civilizations that never have sunlight. So I don't know how that's going to play out, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say is you add the backgrounds of the people.
Yeah.
That's where you make their motivations matter, right? Like my party, my players knew that kind of the idea is you're going to stop you're trying to stop this thing, but their PCs don't know that. All their PCs know is what part of their background got them to Tin Towns.
Yeah, sure.
So
sure.
it's the same kind of thing where I'm focusing on the environment and everything that's going on. And everybody's trying to survive more so than, hey, your job is to just find Oral and destroy her. Like that.
Yeah,
doesn't,
right. Like,
that doesn't work.
and you could see that it would be a lot of the complaints I've read about this adventure. And then I talked to Teo Sabadia about this, right? And he has sort of the same thing. It's like it's missing a theme, right? It's a great big adventure that's missing a theme, and not only is it missing a theme, but all of the sort of sub adventures together don't have a central theme, and that's a flaw of the adventure. And I'm like, look, I think it's got a lot of flaws in a lot of ways, but I think it was designed to be this sort of, it's almost Storm King's Thunder like, in that the central theme doesn't have to be the thing that you're focusing on, and but it doesn't clarify, like, this is what the theme should be.
Now, I have one question.
Focus on this.
I have one question.
So
you created this theme that in your mind ties everything together. And I can see where that leads to tying in the Oral thing eventually as well. How does it tie in those last, 2 chapters?
Yeah, so they know that there's. So okay. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to tie them in. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to run it where you solve the night problem in 2 chapters before the end of the book. So I think I think we talked about this in the Frost Maiden channel too. That I'm probably going to move the idea that if you want to restore the day, you have to go down into what is it called? Yethrin.
Yethrin, yeah.
Yeah, the old city, right? The old Netherese city. So I want that to play more. And I don't know if that's so far off. That's months away. So I'm not I'll figure it out. Right now I just want to figure out how do I deal with freaking winter wolves at level 2. Right. That's my problem, right? And this is to me the big flaws of of the adventure. Now, lucky me, I picked apparently the worst quest of the 10 to for the characters. So session 1 went great, and then session 2 we started off, and I had done a little bit of talk of the themes of the adventure, and recognizing look, if anybody's got a problem with anything at any time, say something in chat, say something in a DM, whatever you want to do, and it wasn't enough because there are a lot of themes in this adventure that can be rough for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, and in the second session we played the Goblin Foaming Mugs. So Foaming Mugs is the Bryn Shander quest. And one of the reasons I like starting off Bryn Shander is that it's probably one of only 2 of the 10 quests that are good for level 1 and 2. All of the rest of them are level 3 and up. They're really you look at them and they're hard quests for levels 1 and 2. And the quest went great, but one of the backgrounds we had from one of the characters, one of the secrets was she can talk to Yetis, right? And so I was like, well, I got to play this in. So I had them. That whole theme is about dwarves got attacked by a Yeti. The Yeti killed them. The iron is all sitting out there. You have to go get the iron, and a bunch of goblins jack you while you're trying to get the iron, and so on. So you're actually attacking when the goblins are there. But I'm like, well, now I've got one of the characters who talks to a Yeti. I definitely have the one to have the Yeti show up, and the Yeti showed up, and the Yeti's talking to the characters, and this is a Yeti, and he's kind of still, she can talk to him, and so she's having this nice conversation. That doesn't mean he's not
still
a
Yeti.
Right. And it doesn't mean he's still not he's 3rd level and he's I killed the dwarves because I'm hungry and I'm still hungry. And the players were like, well, how about you eat one of our mules? Right. And everyone's like, oh, that's, and everybody started running with that. And one of our players is not good with violence. It's one thing when you're fighting a bunch of wolves. It's something else for you to give up a mule you bought at the store and you're caretaking for.
Yeah.
So
you're gonna love my story about a moose when it's my turn.
Yeah. Well, so it upset her, and she said it, but she said it in Discord chat, and we had 15 windows open, and we missed it. So then afterwards, I kind of found out, that this went on, and it was pretty bad. So I really, so. What was it? Today's Thursday. So last night I said I spent a whole week kind of thinking about it. I spent a whole, I did videos on it. I put up a video on YouTube about safety tools and the safety tool stack that I want in line. And I think now I've got a pretty good, it's the first time I've really.
It's almost
it.
It's almost the same story as when my group got to Kresk and the one player had a real issue with the Gollum bride for Strahd that had no voice, that couldn't speak, and that was a real issue.
Right. So and this is not a situation of we have a new group and one of the new people is very sensitive to things. It's someone I played with for decades, right? And we've never had a problem, but this was. And part of it, I think, is also like the stacking on of the hopelessness of this adventure really adds to it. The stress level is a lot higher for everybody when you're playing in this kind of world. So things like that, I think, fire up more so than if you're like in Eberron, where everything's beautiful and clean and bright. So so I kind of rebuilt this stack of like what my safety tools are, which is very clear lines, very clear veils. Anybody can add to the lines and veils as they want. And then our version of an X card, which is a statement that is pause for a moment. Right. And when anybody says pause for a moment, all in-game stuff stops. We break character and we say, sure, what's going on? And so I brought this up and I said, this is how we'll handle this kind of stuff. And somebody used it, in the game yesterday. So, and they didn't use it for something that was bothering them, but they did use it to break character, to say, I think you forgot, in my backstory, I've done a lot of work for this guy that you're making like he doesn't know us at all. And I said, oh, that's right. So I said, okay, great, back in. Oh, you helped us with all that stuff, right? And so it was beyond being used as a safety tool. It also is a good way to just make it clear, like we're breaking character. Because like one of the things I think gets overdone is like, we think of safety tools like it has to be like the most extreme trauma, situation where we drop in. And the answer is like, well, it can be anything.
And one of the things I like,
but go ahead. And
one of the things I like about the way it was used that you just described was that it normalizes the use, so that when there is something serious, then it's just, this is just a thing we do sometimes, and it's okay. Hopefully,
just a thing we do sometimes, and it's just a way to, and so as a DM, I have to, one of the things I love about D&D is I've been playing 25 years or more. I don't know how long I've been playing, a long time, almost 30 years, and I'm learning all new stuff all the time, and I have to kind of think differently about how I play the game. So one of the things I have to do is recognize, like, if I think somebody is uncomfortable, or there's like an interaction between the PCs that's weird or uncomfortable, I can say, pause for a minute. Are we all cool with how this is going? Right? Is this all in game? Or so, like an example, I think I mentioned before in my Ghost of Saltmarsh game, I had some players that allied with a vampire, and I had other players that hated the fact that the other players had allied with a vampire. I never really I did talk to them offline, and they're like, yeah, no, it's fine. But I never had a chance in game to say, hey, everybody, break character. Are we okay with with this kind of stuff? I
wouldn't expect anything less.
So yeah, I agree that like the idea of being able to have a tool like this that isn't, it doesn't have to be the most extreme circumstance for its use, but it does kind of interrupt everything. And it should be, in my opinion, used as everybody stop, like whatever you're doing. Because part of the problem that happened is everybody was piling on the situation, and the person, without anybody realizing it, felt ganged up on, right? It felt like their opinion was pushed aside by 5-6 other people who are running. They didn't even know. So, that you got to stop it right at the moment and say, oh, hang on. The minute I hear somebody else say pause for a minute, I got to stop all of the other conversations, regardless of where they are, and say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. So that's that whole side of it. And it's interesting learning experience for me.
Some, like, I'm imagining some scenarios I've had recently, and there's some risk to it in terms of like breaking immersion, and that the emotional moment in the game was powerful, but I'd rather risk that and not make somebody uncomfortable. So
right. I would it's much better to risk breaking that. And I think you'll get back there. Like, I think if there wasn't anything risky, and going, I think you could drop back in and probably not lose much. But we're not doing theater, right? We're just playing a game, so it's
right. And in some ways, the person saying "let's pause for a minute" during a really pivotal, emotional, or powerful moment actually underscores and elevates that as, okay, this moment is so affecting, that we had to pause. Like, so rather than breaking immersion, it might actually add to the idea of it
people
being
take it all more
powerful.
seriously.
Right.
Yeah. So the tricky, so that aside, then we had our game yesterday, and the game went fine. It was a good game, a 7 out of 10 according to the 3 people I surveyed on it, because I like my data, and so which is 7 out of 10 is my solid. That's like a solid game as far as I'm concerned. And what I've been doing, and the way I've been running the game, is that when they finish one of the quests, they go back to the quest, they go back to the patron, and the patron offers them a number of quests that they can take. And I'm doing it Dragon of Icespire Peak style. So they're offered 3. They pick one. They go do that. They come back. The other 2 are still there. They pick one of the remaining 2.
Mhm.
They do that, and then they get 3 new quests. And one of the other quests drops off the list at that point.
Right.
And that way there's a constant cycle of new ones. They always have a choice, and it will scale through the levels and everything like that. So in my opinion, I kind of wish the adventure did that instead of like, here's 13 quests. Do that one. That's going to kill them.
Yeah.
Right? So I've been doing that, but one of the quests, I put the 3 quests out, and I'm like, these are pretty reasonable quests. These seem okay. And the one they picked was called Hold Up, which is set in Dugan's Hole. And Dugan's Hole, they picked it because they're like, oh, yeah, like people are disappearing and there's weird talking wolves, and they kind of like the talking wolves thing. So, like, let's go deal with what's going on there. But, boy, that whole region and the quest is full of problems. I don't know who decided at WotC, like, hey, let's have a whole town full of people that are engaged in incest. Like, that sounds fun. You know, let's have them all a bunch of inbred people. That's funny. No, it's really not. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw all that out. And it's just a poor place, right? It's the lowest town on the list, and they're broke, right? And they're like that they're probably the one that where the frost has, you know, the eternal night has hit them the hardest. And now they're losing people, and they're getting extorted by wolves. And they're like, we're losing meat to wolves. So they explain the whole situation. Well, the other problem with it is the wolves that are extorting them are winter wolves, right? Winter wolves are badass, right? Winter wolves breathe for 18 points of damage on a breath weapon. And now you could say, well, Mike, why did you pick that as a quest they could get at level 2? And that's a good question. But the problem is, like, that's really hard, right? And they're going to wipe out a group, right? They'll wipe out a group. So I'm like, look, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, and they met him, they had it, and they met the wolves, and they liked the sort of, you know, the good guy, bad guy wolf. They realized it right away. They're like, are we getting good copped, bad copped by 2 wolves, right? Like, it was really funny. And then the wolves like, well, let me, you know, they're working out a deal, and the wolves are taking him to the den where where the frost giant was and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that until next session. But they're like, they're like, I really trust these wolves. These wolves are great. And they're like, not. But the way the adventure goes is, there's all this conversation with the wolves, but there's really no end state for the wolves that doesn't end up without you fighting them and killing them, or them wiping you out, which is more likely. So I'm just going to downgrade them to dire wolves. Like I called them winter wolves. I described them as winter wolves. I'll probably give them dire wolves with a breath weapon and call it a day, right? Which I hate doing. I hate doing that. I hate downgrading monsters. Like, if you fight a winter wolf, it should be a winter wolf. That's but I screwed up, kinda, right? Like, I think the adventure kind of screwed up.
Well, the adventure kind of screwed up. You kind of screwed up. You could argue the players kind of screwed up by picking a quest that they weren't ready for. Like,
well, I mean, but
the thing is, like, if I offer 3 quests, they should be reasonable quests for your level. Like, you shouldn't expect that one of them is going to wipe you out. You know, I mean, and the problem is there isn't a solution for the wolves. You know, there isn't a clear solution for the wolves other than fighting them. They're trying. The players are trying, but the wolves are assholes.
Right.
Pardon me.
I mean, so that's a play style thing, whether or not each quest should be actually set to the level of the players, but or the PCs. That's a different actual conversation. What I did was I used a winter wolf in the very first session that we played.
Yeah.
And I had it with like 2 other wolves that were all emaciated, like really starving and hungry. And so they were very weakened, but the winter wolf still had a breath. And I made sure that when the wolf breathed, it breathed at the 2 PCs that have cold resistance for some reason, right? Because I knew that it could take them out, and I didn't want to. Look, I'm not afraid of killing a PC. I don't have a problem with that, but
it wasn't a mistake they made.
But we put a lot, right, it wasn't a mistake, but we put a lot of work into the Session 0 and their backstories and their secrets. And I think that should be worth something. You know, I think that I shouldn't just indiscriminately kill a PC because, well, that's a really tough creature and they happen to, because they had a chance to run away from it. It wasn't pursuing them. They could have actually gotten away, and they chose to confront it and fight it. But that doesn't mean that the PC should die on the first session of this. What I wanted to do, and the reason why I gave them that particular encounter, it wasn't the whole quest. It was just an encounter with a couple of emaciated wolves. But I did that to show them how desperate everything in this area is. And also, when they killed the wolves, they took the wolf pelt, they took the wolf meat, they tried to take, fangs and stuff so that they could go have things to trade with because they had already heard how bad this area was. So for me, giving them that particular encounter was for a very different reason than just having a combat to wet their whistle, So there was no way I was going to let them be killed
And
by
it also kind
that
of
thing.
gave him the clue that, hey, winter wolves are no joke. And, when you hear later on that there's a problem with winter wolves, you might think twice about whether or not you're ready to go take care of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, my party won't get that quest because
Yeah,
just
I mean, I think there's.
Okay. All right, Mike, are you done?
I think so. Yeah, I'll just like so I was critical of Rime of the Frost Maiden pretty much as soon as it came out. And then I backed off on my criticism because I'm like, it's true, I haven't tried it. Now I've tried it and I'm still critical.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like, hey, I was right.
Yeah.
And I know there's like a million ways. Actually, a lot of the reasons why people don't like it are different.
Right.
So that's something.
Yeah, I'll be,
and I'm sure I can wrangle it into something.
I'll be interested if I ever give it a shot because I think you and I were probably equally critical, and you and I have very different takes on a lot of these things. For example, Descent into Avernus.
It just makes you do. It's making for $50, it's making me do too much work. That's my real issue.
All right.
Yeah. So
I come at that from a totally different perspective. Even though I spent $50, because I know that the first half of this adventure is sandboxy, I know I'm putting in the work. So that part doesn't bother me. And the really deadly aspect of it, I like that style. That's closer to as much as I just sat here and said I didn't want to kill my players in the first game.
You had your wolf breathe on the guys with cold resist.
Right, but the thing is, like, it got the point across, right?
Sure.
My players are now so leery of any kind of danger. Blizzard, they're looking at the weather, they're looking at, the cold light walkers have completely freaked them the hell out, and they've only seen one from like 150 feet away. I mean, it's like, it's crazy, but I like that style, and I like the style where it's very deadly and where the quests are really deadly because it teaches them that they have to find other ways. But you're right about the fact that some of the quests don't really have a way to talk yourself out of it. So that doesn't square with how so it's really important for the DM of this adventure to choose which quests they want to put in front of the players, because if you don't, and you run it really as a pure sandbox without the right set of players, they're all going to end up dead.
Yeah, they're going to go the wrong place and die. Okay, so let's switch now. Before we do though, I do want to mention our sponsor, AwesomeDice.com. They are our curator and seller of awesome dice, appropriately. And the one I want to highlight this time around, we've highlighted their sharp edge dice and their cannabis themed dice and their metal dice and their dice subscription boxes and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that I don't have in my dice collection that I have to start thinking about is the Gemstone Dice, and I particularly like the look of their Bloodstone dice, where and it's sort of the gray black stone with the red running through it, and they talk about how they're all hand carved as well, and so there's some craftsmanship here, and if you're not 100% satisfied, you can swap them out for another set or get a 100% refund. So check that out at awesomedice.com and all their other fantastic dice, and let them know that the Tome Show sent you so that they recognize how you heard about them. All right, Sam, I'm going to put a strict 15 minutes on the clock for you.
Harsh.
Why?
Because Mike went 27 minutes.
There was a lot of cross chat.
That's the point of the show. We're supposed to talk to each other.
Yeah. Okay, so
go. All
right, so I'm still running a whole ton of games, but I will talk about Frostmaiden because that seems to be the topic of the day. So far my party has in the first session, I told you I had them have that wolf encounter. So at the end of the first session, because they handled that so well, I leveled them up to 2. So they were level 2 really by the time they got any of the actual quests. They did.
I know you've talked for like 8 seconds and I'm already interrupting.
32.
Yeah.
Just to note, like when they killed those ghouls in mine, they were level 2 that session. So they were
Yeah,
level
yeah,
2 after the session 0 because I knew I didn't want to deal with level 1 anymore.
Yeah. Well, so I made them level 3 after the second session. So it only took them a couple of sessions to get up to the point where they can basically overrun any of these quests. But part of that's because there's so much stuff going on that they've kind of. So anyway, so they started in Targos. The way I gave them the killer, the cold-hearted killer quest was that they found a body. Okay, they've now found a body in every major town
Yeah,
they've
you
been
turned it
to.
into a whole like scavenger hunt mystery,
Yeah,
right?
it's a whole. It took them some investigation to figure out what happened, and I also did the thing where they figured out that the person who was murdered had something to do with basically either cheating their way out of having their name drawn in the lottery or buying it off somehow. There's actually been 3 different ways that this has come about. So, for example, in Tourmaline, the person who was killed is the young caller, so the town caller who's telling everybody when they walk in. He's on the street corner. He's like a 14-year-old kid or something, and he's telling everybody, hey, there's creatures in the mine and whatever. um, I had them find his body the next morning, and it turns out his father is the one who draws names. That's his job, and he drew his own son's name and he put it
Right.
back, and then he drew a different name, and then like 3 days later his son was found, his body was found, and he admitted it to the players. He was like, he asked to talk to the speaker alone, and because they had already told the speaker, hey, we know there's been 2 other murders in 2 other towns, he said, talk to me in front of them, they're going to help us. And the guy admitted, like, I couldn't turn my own son's name in, so I had to pick a different name, and now this is all my fault. He's gone anyway, and you can't let my wife know. My wife doesn't know that happened, and like it became this huge emotional thing. Talk about like pausing for a second, right? Like that was and all that was the murder and everything's off camera, so there was no like um you know gruesome murder like visual or anything like that. It was just they found the frozen body. It had the carved thing in it, right? So they got that quest really early on, so they were really investigating things. The first real quest they did was foaming mugs, because they went from Targos into Bryn Shander, and so they were in Black Iron Blades looking for a weapon for one of the PCs, and that's when I had the dwarves come in
Oh,
and
that's
say, "Oh,
nice.
we were attacked by a
Yeah, Foaming
Yeti," and
Mugs is the one where they go out into the wilderness and try to recover
right,
the
right,
iron that's been
right.
lost.
Yeah,
So they went out.
it's a
They went
pretty
out to
great,
go.
solid intro quest.
Yeah, it's a really good intro quest, and it puts them in Bryn Shander really early. Which Bryn Shander is a really good starting town.
Yeah.
But they went out, they got the ingots, they brought them back, they completely destroyed the goblins, they set the polar bears free. One of my PCs is a Reghead tribesman from the bear tribe, so that was really a good thing for them to have. And so as a reward, they got the weapon that they had been looking at, and they got free snowshoes, and they got the thanks of the people. And then the next day they went and asked Elsa, the person who runs the front of the house, the blacksmith's sister at Black Iron Blades. They asked her if they could have a set of blacksmith's tools, and so they bargained for that. So that was their reward. They didn't get a whole bunch of money. They didn't, because I'm running it very like there's scarcity going
Yeah.
on, and people are bartering, and there's not really a lot of coin around. So forget any rewards that have anything to do with money, right? Um, they've done the Beautiful Mind quest, and they have just now finished the Lonely Wood. They almost finished the Lonely Wood. They so they went and found the moose. Okay, and um, oh, I also gave them the Nature Spirits quest, but instead of having a Danica Greysteel give it to them, I had them meet Velen Harpel, and they just saw her looking for something, and she said, "Oh, I'm a researcher and I'm looking for this, and if you see them, I'll pay you, I'll pay you
Right.
well for like bringing me
The
information
character
about
with the
these
least
things," right?
suspicious name ever.
Right, I know. Well, that's exactly what they said too. Did they purposefully name this person villain? Like, whatever. um, but so that's how I sort of got all the sort of main players in here. So now they have these contacts, right? But anyway, so they go to they find the Elven tomb so they hear all the stuff about the moose, right? They go find the moose, they find the Elven tomb, and they kill uh Ravison, the druid, who was awakening all these things, right? And she yells at them that that Oral's going to make the towns pay, that this was retribution for all these horrible things that happened in the towns. And so then they're trying to figure out what happened, and they find the sister's body in the sarcophagus. So they go out to talk to the moose, and one of the players, because they finished the beautiful mind quest, and I had the player find the psi crystal, so that player can actually telepathically talk to the moose. So I have the moose tell the
You keep
PC
talking about the moose
that
as if all of our listeners should automatically know what the moose is.
I don't know what you're talking about. I know who the
Yeah, I know
is.
you do because you're running the adventure.
so the quest in Lonelywood is that there is a white moose, a giant white moose on a rampage, and it's killing people. So the speaker of Lonelywood asks the party to go take care of this threat, right? Dispatch the moose, figure out a way to make it go away, do whatever to get rid, because Lonelywood relies on their logging industry, and the loggers are now afraid to go out into the woods because they're getting attacked and trampled. Okay. So when the party goes to find the moose, they find the moose in this old elven tomb that has some wards around it, so not just anybody could find it, but because the party is the party, they end up finding it. And Ravison, a druid that has been awakening all these animals, is in there, and she awakened the moose and is using a mirror that acts like a crystal ball to show the moose who they should attack next, right? To let the moose track their enemies, right? So what I did was I had the moose tell the PCs a story, and the story was the sister that got murdered, the Ravison's sister, who was also a druid, got murdered by these 5 woodsmen because either the implication was they attacked her and she was going to tell on them, so they had to kill her, or she saw them doing something illegal and they were afraid she was going to spill the beans, so they had to kill her. Either way, she didn't deserve to die, right? And they killed her. And at least that's what the moose has been told by Ravison. They don't really know if it's true. So Ravison now is dead because the party killed Ravison. She wouldn't tell them anything because she was going crazy. So now the moose tells them this, but before the moose told them this, they thought the moose was going to charge them. So the one of the PCs cast a spell that put the moose in a big pile of grease. It's from the Deep Magic book from Cobalt Press, okay? And so there's this big pile of grease. So when you try to move out of this area, you have to make a dexterity check or a dexterity save, and if you fail to save, you fall prone. And it cuts your movement in half. Well, and somehow when that happened, so the moose failed their dex save, they fell prone, and then something set the oil on fire, set the grease on fire. So now there's this burning moose, and half of the party is like, what are you doing? Get rid of your spell. Make this stop. You're torturing this poor moose, which can't move, right? Because it kept failing its saves, and it couldn't move far enough to get out of the pile, this big pool of fiery grease. So the moose is burning alive and starts asking the player who was speaking, the PC who was speaking to it telepathically, why are you doing this? I didn't do anything wrong. I've been trying to, make justice. And how come you're here torturing me and all these things, right? So like half of the players get really mad at this other PC for like setting this thing of boiling oil on fire, right? So finally they realize, okay, this moose is, even if they're not telling the truth, they at least think it's the truth, right? The moose thinks that they know what's going on, even if the moose has been lied to. So they heal the moose. They get the moose out of the boiling oil. They heal the moose. And that's when the moose tells them the rest of the story about, oh, well, the sister was killed for knowing something they weren't supposed to know, or these loggers are really horrible. So there's only one left. The moose has killed 4 people. There's only one left. They figure out how to get they end up letting the pumpkin spice mummy free. Okay, so the
No,
elven
no, no, no.
tomb has
You're
it
not going to
has
mention a
yeah.
pumpkin spice mummy and then not tell
I,
people what it is.
I know.
Okay.
Telling you. So the elven tomb at the top has this mummy in a sarcophagus, and if you can figure out how to get the sarcophagus open, and there are clues, but it's not 100% straightforward depending on how the party approaches it, right? But if they can figure out how to remove the lid of the sarcophagus, the mummy will awaken. And the mummy smells like pumpkin spice because of all the things that were
Okay.
used to embalm this mummy. So I had the mummy be actually, rather than just be a kind of intelligence five, like not really useful NPC, which is what they are in the book, I had the mummy be an old Netherese wizard
Mm,
that had died. And so when it came out, it like looked up and was like, what happened to the city? Where'd the city go? Because it's expecting Ithrin to still be flying
right.
above. And that's how the party just heard about the fact that this was an old Netherese empire
Right.
area.
Smart.
Meanwhile, the mummy knows how to use the mirror and make the moon dial work and use the mirror because the party couldn't figure it out. They were trying a whole bunch of things and nothing worked. And so they finally are able to use the mirror. And so the moose says, "Oh, yeah, that's the one. That's my target." And when they look, they see a guy talking to a person in a store in Lonelywood. And the person that I made be the final one is Davrick Fane. And Davrick Fane is an NPC from the Legacy of the Crystal Shard, from the D&D Next
Mm-hmm.
adventure, right? And so he was an acolyte of Oral or something, a priest of Oral, and he has all these grand ideas. But the cool thing that he has is he has a Rimaraz egg, and so he's hiding away because he's waiting for Oral to bless him again in my game. He's waiting for Oral to bless him again, and he's got this Rimaraz egg, and he's been going around trying to like basically seed discord amongst everyone to get people to have more worshippers pray to Oral, right? So the party decides, okay, well, we now that we know who he is, now that we can see what he looks like, and we can go talk to the speaker and tell her, what's going on, and we'll make sure that we confront him in front of a lot of people, including the head of the woodcutters guild, right, of the loggers guild, because they're refusing to go do any more logging until the moose has gone. But now the party can't prove that they got rid of the moose because they didn't kill it. So they can't like bring its head or,
Right.
whatever. So now they have to go to the speaker. So their plan is, this is where we ended last session. Their plan is they are going to, um, so the speaker had told them that the priestess of Oral that lives in Lonelywood or that has visited Lonelywood wants to have a festival ahead of Midwinter in order to prepare everyone for Oral's coming during the Midwinter holiday. And so the speaker has been telling her no, 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 but now they're saying, okay, we need you to go tell her yes, we want to have a festival. And then at this festival, the party is going to dress up the ASMR PC like an angel and have her face be glowing like a cold light walker. Okay. And have her sort of float up and accuse him and say, "I've come to bring justice to you, and you know what you did, and you have to admit it in front of all these
So
people." Basically, so
they're
that's
gonna
kind of their
ghost
plan.
of Christmas past her, or right.
Right, yeah, it's the Davik fame. They're going to do that. And so the reason they got the cold light walker idea was because when they were traveling back from the Elven tomb to get back to Lonelywood, I had them see a light from far away, and it was really super bright. And they looked over and they saw that it's attached to a humanoid, and they just see this light and they see a humanoid walking. So they sort of turn to go see what's happening, but the humanoid isn't going towards any town that they know of, and it's not going towards the tomb that they just came from. So they're not really sure what's going on. So they kind of track it silently for a while, and then when they get to about 90 within 90 feet of it, it sort of turns abruptly and it starts walking kind of in a different direction, and they see when it turns that its face is just really bright light, and it's kind of like it's just like a beacon or a spotlight that follows, and they're like, "Oh crap." And then they freaked out. They're like, okay, we got to get out of here. This is not right. We're going back. So they turn to go back to town, and they see Oral flying over on the Great White Rock, casting the Oral to make, because it's midnight. So she's casting the aura. And when she flies over, they see the Cold Light Walker look up, and the light coming from the face of this thing is so bright, it shines on the belly of the rock and like lights the sky up because it's just so bright with the reflection and everything. And they're like, oh crap, we got to get to town. This is not good. We cannot be out here. So they go back to town. So that's where we ended the session. They're level 3, and I mean, we only completed 3 quests. They're about halfway through catching the serial killer because they kind of caught on finally that this must be the traveling caravan, because they've passed it when they were traveling from one town to another. They've passed that caravan, and they haven't found the Chewinga yet, because I'm sort of waiting for the right moment where they need some levity so they can find the Chewinga with silverware and whatnot. And I think I'm only going to do really 2 more quests. They're definitely going to do the unseen, because I already worked Torog into the mine quest, because he's taking over for what Asmodeus is written, right? So I've worked him in. So I need to do the unseen quest so they learn more about him. And they'll probably do one more. Either they'll do the Black Swords quest, or they'll do the East Haven quest, Toil and Trouble. And then they'll move on. Then I'll start throwing other things at them so that they can start working in the chapter 2 stuff. And they'll stay level 3 for a while, and then I'll make them level 4 just before we move on past chapter 2.
Yeah, Wizards has really leaned on Asmodeus as the big bad evil guy in the background that's never really the main character or the main villain a lot. Like I realize every time he shows up, I've changed it. So Asmodeus hasn't showed up in my game at all, or any of my games at all. But like, what is it, the Castellanters in Dragon Heist are worshippers of Asmodeus, and what's her name, Lady Vacher in Vallaki and Curse of Strahd is an Asmodeus worshipper.
Yeah. So the other thing that you were talking about, Castellanters. So one of my PCs has the runaway author background or secret, and so they wrote the Hellborn. What is it? Hellbent Highborns, about all of the people in Waterdeep that are actually Asmodeus worshippers. And to come to find out, what I did was I made one of the barkeep at the bar in Targos. I made his wife leave him because of all the stuff going on, but then they find out later that's not why she left. She left because she was told to leave by other things, and then they find out, oh, she's a Castellanter. Which really freaks out the player who wrote the book, because she's like, oh crap, Castellanter, this is bad. They might be after me if they know I'm up here and whatever. So yeah, but now I don't run in the Sword Coast. This is the first adventure I've run in the Sword Coast. I usually run homebrew, and I ran Tomb of Annihilation. So Cholt, right. But the thing is, like, for me, I'm just not a huge fan of Asmodeus. I would rather throw in Torog, throw the players off. A lot of the players in this particular game, a couple of them are DMs, so they run in the Sword Coast a lot, so they know a lot of the different background of everything that's happening, and they'll have a lot of associations with Asmodeus that are inconsequential, but whatever. Right. So I just want to throw something kind of weird in there for them, so they don't really know a lot about Torog, but so that makes it sort of more interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'm applauding that. That's part of why, like, and even if you're a Sword Coast Realms purist, like, Asmodeus is part of Realms lore, but he's not a big deal, like, to the degree that he would be showing up this much, right? Traditional realms, the Castellanders would have been secret worshippers of the goddess Shar or something,
Right.
But anyway, good. You good?
I'm good.
Then I want to let people know that another way that you can support the show is you can go shopping. Go to Amazon or DM's Guild through the links at thetomeshow.com. That Sam is always really good about including on every post, so that you can find those banners and click on them, and then we get a little taste of that. DM's Guild affiliate money goes for buying products that we use in reviews, and Amazon affiliate money goes to all of the people who are not me that work on various things, editors and hosts and what have you. And then you can also support us directly over at Patreon, patreon.com/ I think it's the Tome Show. Yeah, that sounds right. And you can be one of our supporters there, and I certainly appreciate that. The coffers are running fairly empty these days, so I appreciate all the patrons that do that and help pay the bills, which I actually need to fix because right now Sam is paying the bills even though he's not supposed to.
I am.
Well, you put your card on it, right? On the host.
Oh, yeah. Whatever. That's fine.
So, not that it's super expensive, but I need to switch it back to me. All right, so it is my turn. Let me make sure I have 15 minutes on the clock. So last time we talked about my Deep Darkness. That was the Dragon Heist into Curse of Strahd game. They had returned from Barovia. Barovia merged with Waterdeep in the surrounding area. The Dark Powers were released by Hallister, and they fought off a couple of the new champions, including one that was a really important background character for one of the PCs. And then I gave them an opportunity to go shopping because I got some players that are used to like 3rd edition style play. And so the idea that like we got 500,000 gold, well, they didn't get 500,000 gold, but we built up all this gold and we can't like go buy magic items. Like that's ridiculous. And it's like, well, but yet you also don't need it. And by letting you go and buy magic items at a magic item shop, then the magic items aren't like special anymore. But it had been an ongoing thing for about 10 levels. So I finally gave them an opportunity in some downtime. And I said, okay, look, you're all complaining about this publicly in the middle of Trollskull Manor, and word gets out, and one morning you wake up and you go downstairs and an imp shows up. And this imp is willing to is working for somebody who is willing to make you a deal. And that deal is you sign this contract and you get one journey, one trip to a magic item shop that will have everything that you want, and it's actually a magic item shop that has been existing in campaigns I've been playing in since 2nd edition, and it's in Sigil, and it's run by, at one time it was run by Beelzebub, and although now I've changed it to Mammon because that makes more sense. So it's run by the demon lord or the archdevil Mammon, right? Archdevil of greed, and he's pretty straightforward. Is like, yeah, whatever you want, I can sell it to you, and there might be a little bit of a markup that they don't know about, and it was a lot of like, I was very clear because there was 2 players who signed the contract, and only one of them have actually gone. The other one's saving it for later, and so the one that went, I told him like this was the guy who was steeped in 3rd edition, right, and he just wanted to be able to say, here's all the magic items I want. I've looked through the catalog. I know what I'm like, yeah, but your character wouldn't know. So for every item that you want to do that with, you're going to have to talk through what you're looking for and narrow it down and look at options until you get what you want. And he's going to charge you 100 gold pieces for every item you do that just for his time. And he still did it with like 90% of the things that they bought. I think there were only 2 items that he's like, I just want a dagger that does more damage and let me be creative and come up with something, right? Only twice. But so we did the shopping trip, and that happened, and we did that all sort of off camera between sessions, just between him and I. And then he came back, and I had this really like this idea that I had actually from listening to Sam and Brandis on the 12 Days of Edition Wars. I think it was the DMG2 maybe from 3rd edition where they talked about spirit companions.
Yep, that's
yeah. So I was inspired by that, and I'm like, some of my players really like Leaf, the poltergeist of Trollskull Manor that you're able to sort of get on your side, and
yeah,
he's this poltergeist has basically been working as the general manager of Trollskull Manor. When the entire manor was taken to Barovia, I said that the transition of going to Barovia actually made him visible again. He actually became a little bit more powerful. And then they came back, and he had learned some things in Barovia in ways that I don't want to waste time going into, but he had learned some things in Barovia, and at this point he's like, I want to have a chance to fulfill my purpose, right? I am here. I haven't been able to move on, and it's because I need to protect this place, and I've come to the realization with all these dark powers running around that this place for me has become this world, and I think you're sort of going to be the way to do that. And so Leaf conducted this ritual, asked them to go shopping. They spent a bunch of gold on various components, and then he conducted this ritual. And I even wrote out sort of the description of the ritual. And he gets the special bowl that they got him. Well, no, it's actually they got him a sand tray that he could use to write, because he can't talk to him, right? So he had this sand tray that he'd been using since like level 2 or 3 with him to talk. So he dumps all the sand out and he puts the various spell components into it, and they're immediately shocked. It's like, but now you can't talk. You got rid of your sand tray. And he gets embers from the fireplace, and he sets fire to all the various components, and smoke fills the area. And I described that it this sort of magical bond between the players becomes visible. You can see these motes of light traveling in a spider web between all the players. This bond that Leaf had described formed between them when they were in Barovia. But there's a darkness in that bond too. There's motes of darkness from the taint of being in Barovia. And then he floats into the center, and he's full of all these motes of light and darkness, and his motes of darkness sort of negate their motes of darkness, and it strengthens the bond between them. And that was sort of this ritual that I described. And he sort of becomes part of the bond. He's no longer an apparition that can run around in the world anymore. He's part of this bond, and I gave them sort of the tier 1 ability of the spirit companion from that DMG. And I had a player in tears over it. And that's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about Mike's great idea of like, hey, pause for a moment, because I was watching her crying, and I'm like, is this something where I need to stop? and I probably should have, just to check in and make sure she was okay. But honestly, I don't think in the end that she would have wanted me to, because she was caught up in the narrative and she was really enjoying it, even though it was emotional and all that kind of stuff, right? But it probably still would have been smarter for me to stop and check in on her. So that really sort of intense moment happened, and it was really strong. It was great. And then they decided that they want to, they each had a vision several sessions before this of one of the new champions of the dark powers in the world, and so they know about Gargoth being one of them, and Elturel, and the contract that they signed, that the two of them signed with the devil, was that Gargoth can't be killed. You have to find a way to trap him. You can't actually kill Gargoth, the champion, because I'm trying to set it up that they're going to create the Shield of the Hidden Lord. But they ultimately they didn't care about that one. They want to go after the necromancer. One of the halfling druid character has this necromancer that has haunted him since his background, that killed his wife and daughter in his background way back in Methwood. And he wants to go after the necromancer, because the necromancer has become one of the champions of the dark powers. And I'm like, well, great, because the necromancer is actually named a Sararak. And he's hanging out down in this tomb in Chult, right? And so they've just gotten to a level where he can cast Tree Stride, and he's like, well, I saw a vision of it. Surely there was a big tree in that jungle. So they Tree Stride straight to Omu. I can skip the entire adventure, which is perfect, because I think it was, as Mike very clearly pointed out, like, you build up these characters and you do this big exploration thing, and then you go to a death trap dungeon that's just there to kill them, and that's a major shift. So we just skip straight to the Death Trap dungeon. But they're also like 13th level, so they're a little higher level than what you're supposed to be at the end of the dungeon. I'm hoping that makes it a little more survivable for them. And so they've spent the last 2 or 3 sessions in the Tomb of the Nine Gods. I've completely removed the spirits, the trickster spirits, the 9 gods themselves. I've sort of alluded to them, but the spirits aren't there anymore. I didn't want to have to deal with her running around Omu and finding the cubes, so I just took that out, and I swapped out the entrance puzzle with one of the puzzles from Tasha's. And so that worked well. And so they've been in the first one, the first time they got there, and they were really struggling with that puzzle from Tasha's, and I was worried, like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be fun for them. Like, they seem to be really frustrated with the fact that they're having trouble figuring out this puzzle. And so I asked them all afterwards, like, no, I love the puzzles. Puzzles are great. We were having trouble with it, but it was fun, and then you get it, and it was awesome, you know? Okay, great. So we can keep trying. And honestly, the rest of the puzzles so far anyway, in the Tomb of the Nine Gods, they're not puzzles. They're not sort of, I don't know, they're not logic puzzles. They're not that kind of puzzle like the ones in Tasha's are. They're tricky. They're trapped things, right? But they've gone through a bunch of stuff, and they only cleared out like half of the first level. So once they get down to the vault and realize they're missing a skeleton key, they're going to have to come all the way back up. That's what I'm putting inside the sarcophagi. I'm putting random ones have the skeleton key that they need to open up the vault. And so they missed one. They're going to have to come back up, which will be a good lesson for them because they have a tendency, even now, to just rush to the end, even when they're kicking themselves about it, like they did with Curse of Strahd. They ran straight to Strahd and didn't explore the catacombs and the rest of the castle very much, and kind of kicked themselves for missing all that. One of the players even told me, I made the mistake of looking at the module and realized I missed a chance for a Staff of Power, and I'm really mad about it. I'm like, well, you made two mistakes there. One, you didn't go exploring, and you could have, and two, stop reading the module of the adventure we're running. You know, that's no fun. So anyway, it's going well, and they're enjoying the combat encounters, because they're higher level, are a cakewalk. Like, they run into a Tomb Guardian. Oh no, it's another one of those. It takes us a round and a half. We put it down and we move on. If the Tomb Guardian is really lucky, maybe it hits us once or twice, and they do some decent damage. But the Tomb Guardians aren't super scary.
Have you seen my Sly Flourish enhanced Tomb Guardian generator?
Not, no.
So
I'll have to look at
badass.
it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But they also, the reason they only explored half of the first level is because they found the secret door that goes down into like the workshop area. And so they're like, well, we know there's all these, we saw these other stairs, we saw these other places we could go, but clearly if it's behind a secret door, we should go there. And so they went down the stairs and they found where they make the Tomb Guardians, and they wiped out all the Tomb Dwarves, and they found Withers and killed Withers, and so now there's nobody there to sort of go around and reset the traps and all that. And then they did clear out all of level 2, but instead of going down the big stairs, they haven't gone up or down the big stairs once. Instead of going down the big stairs, they went down the Green Devil mouth that's in the one room that goes down into the middle of one of the sarcophagus rooms, one of the crypts or whatever. And I'm realizing, because that's where we ended last session, was they just sort of climbed down this rope that they set up down through the darkness into and it's the one that's set up with all the hieroglyphs in a pattern on the floor, and you're supposed to like follow instructions on the door that you use to get into the room. That there's a dial or whatever that shows you which tiles to step on in order to unlock the sarcophagus. But they just rappelled down into the middle of it. And I'm kind of the adventure kind of implies that congratulations, you found a shortcut and you bypassed the trap. Except it also describes that the only way to open the sarcophagus is to step on the right tiles in order to get it to open. But
do you remember what level that's on?
It's on the third level. Yeah, so they're all inside the room. The clue, and they're looking around like, let's search the walls, let's look around. There's almost always clues about these things, right? Well, the clue is on the door on the outside of the room. And they can't get to it without stepping on the hieroglyphs tiles. And if they every time you step on the wrong one, locusts swarm out of the statues and the Sphinx statues in the corners and attack them.
I remember this
so like
one.
it's gonna be there's gonna be 500 magical locust swarms attacking them because they have no chance of guessing what the right tiles are to get out correctly. So
it might be time to throw a skill on it.
Well, and part of me, so there was a previous situation where they got to a coffin and I remembered wrong, and in my quick skimming of the room as they went into it, like I skimmed it wrong, and it was one where like the coffin is secured to the floor with sovereign glue.
Yeah.
And that way you can't move it out from under the light, so when you open it, the light hits the plaque on the inside and the bad things happen, right? But I read it wrong, and I read it as the coffin lid is secured with sovereign glue.
Oh, no. So,
so there's no way to open it. So they're like, well, and they got the genie, and they freed the genie, and the genie agreed to be sort of honor bound to provide them with the casting of 3 spells, and then it'll go away. So they used up one of the genie spells on that, saying, well, cast Stone Shaper, Pass Wall on the coffin lid, except that the module explicitly says that neither of those things work. So ultimately I let them just take tools and just smash the lid, a hole in the lid, so they could figure out what was in there. And so that was a mess, and so now I'm kind of tempted, since I've already set the precedent that you can eventually like spend half an hour to an hour just smashing a hole in the lid. Maybe I'll just let them do that here with this Egyptian themed one, instead of punishing them for finding the shortcut that the module says or like acts like it's a good thing, but then it turns out it actually punishes you for doing it. Because it was in one of the, like, there's clues to the puzzles or the traps on the wall in the big stair room on each floor, and the one on level 2 specifically says that like it's a good idea to go down into the darkness, to jump down in that hole or whatever. Maybe not jump, but go down in that hole, and then you do it, and it's not true because it puts you in the middle of this thing and no way to figure out the solution. Because there's nobody on the outside to look at the solution. So anyway, so that's where we're at.
Can I offer you some official Sly Flourish super dangerous Tomb Guardians? An abyssal Tomb Guardian armed with a forceful morning star and a flaming spiked chain, empowered by a fire shield spell.
And those are slyflourish.com.
Do a search for Tomb Guardian generated. I pasted into the Twitch chat here
great.
too. Here's another fun one. A Dragonborn Tomb Guardian armed with an acidic warhammer and a thunderous flail, empowered by a Spirit Guardian spell. So they all have like a spell that sort of fires off, and then they've got weapons that are powered by crazy elemental stuff. Right. They all have an origin, and the weapons are all different. Nice. So every time you see them, they're like, what the hell is that?
Well,
so I had like a what are those evil fey dwarves called? Red caps. Oh. I had a red cap armed with a pair of like necrotic scythes that had greater invisibility, so you could hear him but you couldn't see him, and he would just cut the heads off of people with his crazy scythes. Awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, that'll be good. That'll be cool. I'm definitely gonna look at that and pull.
It's fun ways to flavor the Tomb Guard.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, and I even told them that the fact that the combat encounters so far have been a cakewalk, I'm kind of okay with, because that's not what they're freaked out about, and that's not what's supposed to freak you out about.
That's not what's dangerous, right? Yeah, the Tomb Guardians are like ushers, right? They're there to sort of shovel you into these rooms, right? More than they are anything else. Like Withers, I think my group's kept Withers around because he was the guy that did polls on how sad they were, right? Like he was like, oh, when you went into that, like how depressed were you after doing the trap on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Like how hopeless. And they were like, oh yeah, it was terrible. And it's like, oh, good. Yeah.
I ran Withers as written, and Withers is written as like he's really curious and he asks you lots of questions, and they had this conversation with him, and then they're like, okay, well, I guess we'll go. And then,
time to kill you now.
they're like, well, I guess we'll go. And I'm like, all right, well, I never got to the part where he says it's time to kill you. But then one player was like, oh no, I want to ask him that. So they went back. And that's when the conversation continues. Like, all right, well, this was fun, but I guess it's time for you to die now. So, and I boosted his hit points a little bit and whatever, made him survivable.
Yeah, you could. I think I turned mine into a lich. That made him really powerful.
The one thing that I was struggling with 2 weeks ago was resting in the tomb. What stops you from just doing a 5-minute workday and taking a 24-hour rest?
Tomb Guardians.
All the time. Sure, except they've wiped out the way the Tomb Guardians are made. In theory, there's only so many of them left, right? But I ran into what I have to assume was the intentional solution to this that they never seem to spell out in the adventure, is that there's 3 hags running around on the ethereal plane, and night hags have a nightmare ability that specifically messes with people who sleep.
I used that.
And so I figured, well, sure, there's one hanging out watching them in the ethereal plane right now. So even though they threw up their Liamon's tiny hut, the hag was inside the hut with them. And so I rolled at random. I created a chart. So I have 5 players, and I made 4 possible visions that were actual, like, tied to their character and their arc and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's 5 visions, 4 visions for each of them. So there's 20 total visions. So when they rested, I just told one of the players, hey, roll a d20. Whatever number it is, that's who's having the vision and what vision they're having. And it happened to be him. So his character had the vision. And it was, it had the impact, right? It freaked him out. And so I'm thinking, next time they do a long rest, maybe that hag brought another hag along, and now there's 2.
See, I did the thing where they cast Liamon's tiny hut, and every time they would try to do something like that, I would have Withers show up.
Yeah.
And he would, like, come up to the thing, and they would see him, like, knocking on it and trying to, like, figure out how to, like, what side, like, doing all these measurements, and like trying to figure out what it's made of and doing all these things, because of course he's one of the architects, right? Like, he maintains it, he knows how everything works, so he was trying to figure out everything. And I mean, I also made it so he could just cast dispel. Sure. He could dispel it, and he did one time so that they would learn that he could do that. But, like, for the first time they did it, he was over there. They're like, who the hell is this guy? Because they would see him, like, trying to listen and, like, do measurements and trying to, like, use different tools to cut a little window in it and, like, do all these things that they, and it kept them, like, paranoid and preoccupied, because they're like, is he going to figure out some way to undo it? Like, so they did not get a real good. I gave them the benefit of the rest one time, and then the next time they did it, he came and he was using ever more powerful ways to get rid of, because it was blocking his property.
And that's a great solution, except that they killed my Withers in session 1. So
bring him back.
Yeah, that's true.
He comes back.
That's true.
Like, yeah.
So a couple of my favorite ones were the time that he completely covered theirs in crawling claws. So the minute they popped out and they were done, they got crawling claws
all over,
dropping all over them, like hands crawling on their faces. And the other time they woke up and there's this little bead that's sitting right in front of a little orange bead, and it was a delayed blast fireball, and it blew up and immediately did like 45 damage to them right after.
So far, I really like using the hags in this way, and I think if I just slowly ramp it up, and I've got these visions, and so it feels really visceral and emotional for them. So I think if it's just, the first time it's 1, and the second time there's 2 at random, and the third time there's 3 of them at random, and slowly they're getting less and less benefit from the rest anyway, and they never know who's going to get hosed. So I'm going to keep trying that for now, instead of just bringing Withers back. I might bring it back at some point, but right now they're going to deal with a Beholder, because that's the level they're on, is the Beholder level.
Yeah, a Beholder that can I offer suggestions? So the Beholder's invisibility makes it really, really tough. But I would probably, if your characters are powerful, I would throw a couple of blind sight powerhouse monsters to knock them around when the Beholder's using his anti-magic shell on them. because one casting of darkness can ruin a beholder.
Right.
Right. Like everything a beholder does requires that he can see, but he can use his anti-magic. He can use his anti-magic cone to get rid of the darkness, but he can't then use eye rays on
Right.
them. So if you put some guys that can see in darkness, they can go and pummel the hell out of the people that are casting darkness or invisibility. So it's
maybe there's a couple of souped up Sly Flourish Tomb Guardians hanging out in there with him.
Blind
Tomb Guardians.
Blind sight Tomb Guardians would be awesome. Yeah, with their acidic flails and flaming whips.
All right. Well, we all. Well, you know what? No, I've significantly gone over my time. Mike significantly went over his time. Sam just went a little bit over his time because Sam is the consummate professional.
No, it's because last time I went way over and then I had to leave early, so I missed Mike's thing. I was trying to be a team player this week.
Mike, did you say you put that link in the Twitch chat?
That I did. Yeah, it's in the. Oh, you know what? It's in my Twitch chat.
Oh, okay.
Because I was hosting it.
I say because our Twitch, the Tome Show Twitch chat, unless mine's
they're like,
unless mine's frozen, has not moved in forever. There you go.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't frozen or something.
Search for Tomb Guardian.
That's usually what I do. Most recently I was thinking about because my current campaign might be over in somewhere between 2 months and I don't know, 6 months. So, so I'm starting to think about what we're going to do next. And I know eventually our next big campaign will be to sit into Avernus, but I think we need some palate cleanser, shorter things in between. And one of the things I always go to, especially because they've never played it before, is I still think one of the best sessions I've ever had of a role-playing game was Aeon Wave. Both as a GM and as a player when you ran it. It was just really good. So what I'm saying is, I know it's probably not one of your better selling products or whatever, but like, I need more Aeon Wave because that was phenomenal.
I'm glad you dug it.
So, all right. So.
Well, so while we're praising Mike, I just want to give some praise to Fantastic Layers.
Yay!
I've used a couple of those layers about 4 times in 3 different games now. I mean, I fiddle with them and I change them, but also it's the same with 2C Gaming's TPK handbook thing. That's basically a book of layers too, of different levels, for a slightly different format, but like that sort of stuff, I really like that kind of product because I can pull it, I can put it into my game, I can change it however I want. I don't have to read 20 pages of giant backstory, and that sort of thing. And it's kind of the difference between, when you get a product like Rime of the Frost Maiden, where, as you say, you're spending $50, you're getting 300 pages of content, and it's good and it's in depth and it's big, but man, it's a lot to do. Whereas I can run a game, I can run a one shot with a Fantastic Lair and have a great gaming session and then not have to worry about, doing anything else. So yeah, it's nice.
No, I've had I think I desire both kinds of products in my world. But I have there are not enough of those kinds of products, and I've leaned on them fairly heavily. Actually, just the other day I was looking through Fantastic Layers and some other things similar to it pretty extensively because like I have all these champions of dark powers running around in my Forgotten Realms now. I need layers and places for them to be because I only really know where 2 of them are. The rest of them are all 3. I guess I know where 3 of them are. The rest there's like 20 some of them. So I'm like, what if they decide to go hunt down Tarhawk, who's like kind of been featured since level 3 because that's who the Castlanters were worshiping. Where the hell is Tarhawk gonna be? In fact, Tarhawk's champion, I think, is the one that I made that the Castellanter children merged together and became this giant 2-headed kaiju. The soulless Castellanter children in the middle of Waterdeep turned into this 2-headed kaiju and stomped their way out of the city. I've used that. I'm pulling from that as well. Whenever they are going to some champion that I'm not sure what the heck is going on there, I'm pulling from those layers and things like that pretty heavily. So good job, Mike.
Yeah, if I could just give a plug, it's now officially for sale to everybody. So go to Drive-Thru, and right now it's the number 2 bestseller on Drive-Thru RPG. So if you go to Drive-Thru RPG,
let's get it to number 1
now. That'd be great. We got to beat out Cyberpunk Red is the what we have to beat. So I don't know about that. Like,
Go for it.
Surpassing another entire RPG is a little hard.
You're better than me.
Yeah. So you can find Fantastic Lair on DriveThruRPG or go to fantasticlairs.com and you can find it on all of its various avenues. But yeah, it's now out. It's in hardcover and softcover and PDF. The PDF includes VTT maps to play online.
Which will be huge. Yeah. I probably...
Yeah, even if you only use the maps.
I probably put 10, 15 hours into converting the Tomb of the Nine Gods to a VTT. And even then, the grid doesn't line up quite right. But I didn't want to buy the product just to run the one dungeon, so...
Yeah. So ours tells you the dimensions both in squares and in pixels inside the file, so that you can tell it exactly how big it is. We tested it in every VTT.
Well, I figured because
I always just turn off the grid on.
Yeah, the other one is turn off the grid and turn off.
I just turn off the grid and leave the grid. Use the map with the grid on it, and just turn off the grid and snap.
Yeah, it just then auras and things for characters aren't quite right, but.
It'll be okay.
No, yeah, I'm not disagreeing. I've done it. It's been fine.
Damn it, Jeff!
But I figured it would be set up well to work well with the VTTs because James, who worked on the product with you, also used to work for Roll20, basically doing that. So I figured he.
Yeah, he did a lot of the conversion for it. Yeah. So and all the cartographers that we worked with, we gave them specs to make sure that the maps came back and were suitable.
We've been saying entirely too many nice things to Mike, so we need to move on and go ahead and wrap the show up. I know that Mike gets a bit of a big head, and we don't want to encourage that. So
well, okay, so I can tout my product. The Creed of Oral, which is on DM's Guild, is a copper bestseller now. It's sold more than 50. It's called The Creed of Oral. It is it's for your Rime of the Frostmaiden game if you want to put the Cult of Oral into the game.
Yes, I do, and I'm going to buy it right now.
Yeah, heck yeah. If I ever decide to run Rime of the Frostmaiden, after all of my concerns about it that have not necessarily been allayed as I listen to people actually running it, that'll be my first go-to add-on to it. So because I don't run any published adventures without buying a bunch of stuff on DM's Guild and adding to it. So. All right, this episode is over. We are finished. So that's the end of the episode, and say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Bye, guys.
And we'll see you all later. So I'm going to stop the recording. The stream is still going. If you want to say goodbye to folks in the stream.
Goodbye, stream people.
Because I'm tired. As Sam pointed out, these first few weeks of a new semester are exhausting.
You're tired. You know what time I woke up this morning? 4:30 in the morning. I'm tired.
I believe you. I my life is such that we're up at like 5, and that's every morning. So yeah.
Okay, that sucks.
So anyway, thanks for joining us, guys. Say goodbye to the stream.
Goodbye, everybody.
Hi, stream. Thank you.
I can't transition to it.